Welcome to the Southern Ohio Synod's podcast. I am Pastor Rebecca Great, and I serve as the media ambassador and storyteller for the Southern Ohio Synod, which means I coordinate communication via our social media profiles, coordinate our weekly and monthly newsletters, and help with keeping our website up to date. I am so glad you have joined us for our episode today.
My name is Pastor Bob Abrams. I'm assistant to the bishop in the Southern Ohio Synod, and I'm happy to have with me today Pastor Mike Weaver, who is not only an integral part of how we lead our congregations in the Synod as a pastor, but also brings other things, other gifts to the table that he uses for the benefit of other rostered ministers in our Synod. And so welcome to you.
Yeah, thank you. Mike. So grateful to be here. Thank you.
Talk not only about where you are, what you do right now as a pastor, but also this interesting set of gifts that God has given you to support other rostered ministers in their ministry. And when I talk about rostered ministers, I'm talking about pastors and deacons in this synod. And sometimes, perhaps, outside of this synod, depending on who you interact with, right?
Exactly right. That's exactly right. Yeah, so right now I'm the senior pastor at St. Luke Lutheran Church in Gahanna, Ohio. I was the interim senior pastor for the last couple of years in that congregation, but been at St. Luke for now, it'll be 5 years in April, this past April, when we're recording this. Prior to that, I was at All Saints in Worthington for 16 years, and then as associate pastor.
What that call meant to you to serve in that second chair, in that associate role?
Yeah, I have come to believe in my role as a pastor. First, I believe in the mission of the church. I want the church, whatever church I serve, to function really well. And part of that functioning really well, part of it is strong leadership and stable leadership. And when I was at All Saints, I loved being at All Saints. I love the people there, the mission that they had and they have. I still appreciate that congregation. And when I was there, I didn't feel called to be the lead in that way. That opening wasn't there anyway. Nor did I feel called to leave to go pursue a lead pastor position. What I felt like in those 16 years was God saying, be the best teammate possible. Because associate pastor role is a unique role for pastors, and there's sometimes we do good at it and sometimes we don't. I mean, sometimes there's fits and starts with it because ambition starts creeping up in pastors, or we have sometimes competition with our colleagues and so on. And whether we maybe sometimes we don't want to admit it, but that's there. But I felt like I want to be, if God called me into that place to be associate pastor, be the best associate pastor I can be for the sake of the mission of that church and the leadership of that church. And if that meant being the second chair, that meant being the second chair. I didn't feel called to leave All Saints till God called me to leave All Saints to go to St. Luke. And God didn't call me to become the senior pastor till God called me to become a senior pastor. One of the things that I've learned about my relationship with the Lord is over the last 26 years, well, no, longer than that, when I first called to go to seminary, was whenever God wanted me to do something, it's been really clear, and I have to wait on it. And the Spirit moves when the Spirit wants to move, but I know it when it happens. And that for 16 years, that never happened. So I'm like, I was just supposed to be here and be the best teammate possible. And until there was a time where it was like, no, it's time to go. And then I pursued going and found out St. Luke. And then the last couple of years was, no, you're supposed to be the interim senior pastor. And then recently, in the last year, it was like, God's like, no, it's time for you to put your name in for the senior pastor. So that's the way God and I operate. When the timing's right, the timing's right. And until the timing's right, I stay where I'm at.
Takes a lot of patience.
It's a lot of patience. And there's some nights with anxiety, right? That comes with that. It's like when, I don't know. I'll just keep doing what I'm doing until I'm told to do otherwise.
Serving in the associate role perhaps freed you up to have other areas of interest.
Yeah.
Professionally, that.
Oh, absolutely. No question. Yeah. The pressure on associate pastor is much less than a lead pastor. I mean, there's still pressure in any pastor's position. It's just different levels of pressure and responsibility. But the associate pastor role did allow me to God open some doors to support leaders as a coach, to pursue certification as a coach, which I have that certification, and that was in the last 10 years. I'm grateful to be serving leaders as a coach in that way and on a one-on-one basis, mostly, predominantly. So it gave me time to do that. And then also, 22 years ago or something like that, when I was associate pastor, to take an improv class. And that was a door that I didn't expect to open, but it's offered so much to my ministry, to me personally, but gratefully been able to offer that to other church leaders, rostered and non, to help them navigate the challenges of ministry in a really impactful way.
Or both of those things, because coaching and your improv have opened up doors, not only just make you a better pastor,
Yeah,
but to help others be better pastors or deacons or leaders as well.
absolutely true. Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about what drew you to coaching and what certifications you decided to get.
I was in a time in my ministry at All Saints that I call it a vocational itch. Like I couldn't scratch it. I'd been at All Saints maybe 10 years at that point. And I was like, this is fine. And I don't feel God's calling me to leave. That's not that clear. But I don't know what that is. And it was like, I just couldn't get at it. And so a friend of mine who's not a Lutheran pastor, he's a non-denominational pastor who's also a coach, I said to him, Tyus, could you be my coach for a while and help me just kind of discern whatever this is, not knowing what this is? And so he was my coach for a year. And we met on a regular basis, a couple times a month, to look at, just put everything on the table. Like what's inside me, were some passions, some ideas, some thoughts, what's my family like, and how's all this impact my family, and so on and so on and so forth. We'd put everything out there. And it was a fruitful year of partnering with that coach, Tyus. And at the end of that was this sense of like, you're supposed to become a coach. Like, oh, okay. Yeah.
What is the benefit of talking to someone else about your thinking, your context? What is the benefit of that?
Well, in a coaching context, like with Tyus, and I'd known Tyus for years, but what that offered me, what it made available, was a focused conversation, a very focused. He's just, as the coach, he's in it for my benefit. It's not his agenda. He's there to listen deeply and to ask questions that I can't ask myself because I'm not thinking that way, right? I can't access all the stuff in my brain, but he can see things that I can't see from the outside point of view. And that focused time and that focused conversation really propelled me forward in a really powerful way. What Tyus did right, and what the best coaches do, is they create space, and they hold the space for a focused conversation to happen. And then out of what the client is sharing. So for me, when I was with Tyus, me as the client, whatever I'm sharing, there's going to be questions that needs to be asked that's emerging in the moment that he's paying attention to in his own mind to ask that question. So he's really asking questions based on what he's hearing from me. For me as a coach, is creating an analogy or a metaphor that helps creatively a person think through, which allows the person to get some objectivity on their situation and to kind of get a 30,000 foot view on themselves and go, oh, now I see it, because they've kind of removed themselves a little bit from their situation.
So you decided, after this experience with him, Tyus, you decided that you felt a call to become a coach yourself.
without question. I mean, it was as clear as any call I've ever received in my life that God was like, I want you to serve the church in this way, to serve leaders as a coach. So I looked into certification through the International Coaching Federation, ICF. They have accredited schools that they work with, or they accredit. And I found one in Vancouver, British Columbia. I didn't go to British Columbia. They had online learning. I did do a long weekend with them, and it's called Erickson, and it was really interesting. The first coaching class I ever took, I was like, wow, this is like, I get it. I get this. I don't have all the skills, but I understand the mindset. Because as pastors, we understand what it means to listen closely, to create space. I've done that. But what coaching training did was it gave me sharper focus and tools and skills and ways of framing conversations or holding the space in a different way. So even more that person and what's going on inside them comes out so they can move forward in their life.
The type of certification you got was what?
Certification in leadership coaching, coaching leaders.
And eventually you became part of the ELCA coaching network. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I got that first certification through Erickson, and then I got a certification in influence coaching from Karen Keller, who's in Michigan. She's a clinical psychologist who's developed a lot of work on influence and what makes an influential leader. So I'm one of the few, there's maybe 15 of us who are certified in that way as a certified coach in influence. And then through the ELCA, there's an ELCA certification for coaching, which I went through that training as well. And as a Synod Coaching Coordinator, there's coaching coordinators across the United States that are part of the ELCA network of coaches. So I'm part of that network as well, and meet with the ELCA coaching coordinators on a regular basis. What's interesting, this is the serendipity of all this, when I felt like God was saying, I want you to coach through that time with Tyus. Around that same time, I approached Bishop Dillahunt and I said, I feel like God's wanting me to do this. And in the conversation, Bishop Dillahunt said, well, that's interesting. Coaching has been the emerging part of our vision for the future. This was in the teens, 20 teens.
Yes.
And I didn't know that. And she didn't know this was where I felt like God was taking me. But then when we had this conversation, it's like, I think this is the right thing. And so like, okay, well, let's see what happens. And so as I went through the training, I just kept Bishop Dillahunt abreast of my training. And then we eventually figured out there's a Synod Coaching Coordinator position that synods have. Not all synods, but some synods do. That was an emerging thing in the ELCA at that point. It's much more robust now, but it wasn't robust then. But yeah, it felt like there was things happening behind the scenes that God was orchestrating. It was then, it still is exciting. And yeah, so then what happened was I started working with pastors in our synod on a one-on-one basis.
So you're an associate, then a senior pastor, but also the coaching coordinator of the Southern Ohio Synod. But there's this other piece that you mentioned, improv. And when you say improv, we're talking about a form of comedy, aren't we?
Yeah, it's more a form of theater. So improv can be comedic, and lots of times it is. And that's what we see. Like there's improv theaters that are very comedy oriented, but on a very realistic level, that's the right word. Improv is about creating theater in the moment. And that theater could be dramatic. It could be funny. It could be all kinds of different ways you can go with it. And I've seen it all. I've seen improv on stage as an audience member brought me to tears because it wasn't funny. It was just real. And just like any movie would draw me to tears, like in that way.
Become interested in improv? How did you become a person who participates?
Well, again, in 2000, winter 2003, I was in Gehenna. I was at associate pastor at All Saints. And I was at Grader's Ice Cream in Gehenna, Ohio, and I saw a poster on the wall that said improv for professionals. Learn to think on your feet, and so on. There's different things. And I thought, well, that's interesting. I'm a professional. I have to think on my feet. I do public speaking. I wonder if improv could help. So I'm like, I don't know. It was a complete hunch. And so I started taking, it was like 6 weeks of classes down in downtown Columbus, taught by an actress from New York City, trained actress. And with those 6 weeks were like the most revolutionary 6 weeks of classes I've ever taken in my life. They were just like, they blew me away and I remember it was in the first 15 minutes of in that first class, I thought, I'm home. I don't even know these people, but I felt like I've known these people forever. And we're doing these crazy exercises that feel silly, but I get it. And then we started learning more, and I'm like, I can't help but learn. I want to learn even more. And then so I took a whole year of classes. I just kept taking classes from Carolyn. And through that year, I was like connecting the dots between the art of improv and what happens in that art form to what is ministry? What does the gospel look like? Is this how God is sometimes with us? And it became a whole 20-year pursuit. I'm still not done of connecting dots between improv theater and God, theology, the life of the church, the mission of the church, leadership in the church, and so on. Yeah, it was incredible.
What has improv done for you as a pastor?
It has empowered me to be fully in the moment with folks. It's freed me to not feel like I have to have the answer. It's allowed me to be ordinary. That I don't have to be, like I said, the answer guy, but I don't need to be all anxious. I can be in the moment with somebody and be ordinary, this ordinary moment, and trust that something good is going to happen between us as we have a conversation or whatever's going on. So I'm free to enter a moment, enter uncertainty, enter the unknowns that is filled. That's ministry in a nutshell, and on a weekly basis sometimes. And also to think on my feet and trust that what I have inside me is enough. I don't have to be brilliant. I don't have to be, when the moment I try to be brilliant, I'm not being brilliant. But the moment I'm more just speaking honestly, because there's enough in me, that's when the beauty comes. That's what I've learned about myself and what improv has taught me. And those are all improv skills that any improviser on stage knows.
Maybe you touched on this. I am curious. When you allow yourself that space, what is improv bringing out in you when you're on stage or in front of people and you are creating theater spontaneously? What is being tapped in you?
Honesty is being tapped in me. An honest response, a thoughtful response. So I just did a training, and I say that because I just did a training, an improv, a long weekend a couple months ago, and taught by a guy from Los Angeles who's done improv and been an actor for decades. And he taught us all about like being really present with your scene partner. So if you were in a scene together, you and I, Rob, like it's listening exactly to what that person just said. Like they're not just what their words, their inflection, how their body is being handled. Like you start looking and listening, not just with your ears, but with your eyes. And because everything's at play. And so tone of voice, body language, words that are shared. And so it's being hyper aware of my scene partner in improv and just staying so right there. And then from what they say, something inside me is coming up based on what they said. I'm not pre-planning. I'm listening And what you said, something else happens. So what it's doing in me is causing honesty, an honest response to the given circumstances. That's what is done. That's what happens.
Have been struck by the fact that you have these two independent almost threads in your ministry. One being coaching, which is about freeing up space, clear thinking. And then also this skill of creating spontaneous theater, which is also about listening and clear thinking and living in the moment.
Yeah, because coaching is improv to me. It's coaching. I don't go into any one-on-one coaching with anybody I work with a pre-planned idea of where this coaching session is going to go. I have no idea. Neither does my client. The client begins with an idea of where he or she hopes to end the conversation with, right? That's always the first question. Like, what's the best use of the time? What do you want to talk about today? And then out of that, we just kind of go back and forth. And as a coach, I put myself in a position where I'm open and responsive and listening deeply and listening to what that person just said. Is there a metaphor? Is there something going on? And then honestly, from my own gut and my brain, put that out there. And then the client then responds. And so we're creating a moment together. We're co-creating the moment, and we're co-creating a solution for that client that we don't know necessarily what that solution is going to be. We're always surprised at the end. It's the most brilliant hour that I spend with people. I love it because it's improv with a structure of coaching around it.
What led you to put your experience into writing for others to experience?
Because all that stuff has been rattling in my head for 20 years, and it's still rattling around in my head. But that was my attempt to go, okay, what do I know? What have I learned? How have I connected the dots? And let's see if I can get that on paper. And so that's what that was. And it also, so it's been 20 years in the making, number one. But through the pandemic and the uncertainty of the pandemic, I found myself not worried. I wasn't anxious in the pandemic. I was concerned. I mean, it was challenging, no question about it. It's challenging for everybody, including me. But there was a point where I'm like, this is an improvised time for all of us. We're now all improvisers. That we're all in this uncertain moment together. We don't even know what the future is going to be, and yet we have an opportunity to co-create the future. Because we know the future is changing. We know this moment's changing. This time that we're in is so unique. So how can we work together? We're not helpless in this. We all have something that we can offer. So how can we move together? And so that book was like, and that's all improv. That's all improv. And I thought, I wonder if what I know could help in times of uncertainty, where times are volatile times, or whatever's going on that we all face.
What led you to choose that title?
I just think that, number one, people we get stuck in our own stuff. We get stuck in our own thinking. We're processing, or we're afraid to deal with something, and we're like living in a cul-de-sac, and we just keep circling the cul-de-sac and hoping that an entrance will appear. We're praying that an entrance will appear, and God's like, an entrance has appeared. It's just a matter of just kind of moving forward. And that unstuck is helping people get out of the cul-de-sac, get out of those things that would be thinking or fears or anxieties or fear of the unknown, fear of the uncertainty, to trust, to be empowered to get out of it and start making forward progress. I think there's a fatigue that comes with being stuck, and we can manage it for a while, and eventually we go, man, something's got to change. We just think it's something, I can't do this anymore. Whatever that is, I keep doing the same thing with no results and hoping that result's going to come. It's not going to come until something changes, maybe conversation.
What is it like to do improv with pastors?
It's fun, number one, but it can be challenging for pastors, and not just pastors, anybody, because improv is a unique space to be in. But for pastors in particular, it's sometimes it's hard for us to kind of lay aside our clerginess, because we're so used to being up front and crafting things and being the answer person, or pastor, what do you think of this? And we have to have when we present ourselves in a particular way, which is all well and good. But in improv, we're just here together. We got 2 feet in the ground, and we're going to create something just as ordinary people. And that can be a challenge.
Book that the freedom to be ordinary frees up a part of you that ordinarily might be controlled by your emotions.
Yeah, exactly. No, not to say that as professionals we carry the professional decorum, or we need to be mindful that we're professionals, and balance that with a sense of like, yeah, I'm a professional and I'm just an ordinary person too. And that allowing that kind of percolating up of some things that we might push away because it just doesn't feel like it fits or whatever that is. Maybe the Spirit's at work. Maybe the Spirit's kind of poking at us a little bit to help us kind of loosen up and to be connecting with people. Because I find that the people I serve as a pastor over the last many years, they'll connect more with our failures and our struggles. And I know that it's going to be tricky because we don't want to be, put all that out there, right? There's professional in that. But when we're just ordinary people, like Jesus was incarnate God himself, and yet he was as ordinary as they came. And there was a connection that he had that the Pharisees didn't have with ordinary people because he was ordinary himself.
I've heard so many times, and I've experienced this as well, that people do connect when we are authentic. So maybe another way of saying what you've said is that improv helps you connect with the authentic you. Your book talks about understanding or finding your values, finding your passions. Could you tell me more about that?
Yeah, because the values are the core of who we are. And we all have values operating whether we know it or not. I've helped, like St. Luke, we developed our core values 2 years ago. And that's helped us make decisions like how do we spend our money, how do we spend our time, and so on. Once we name them. But it's true for organizations, but it's also true for individuals. Like I've done that work on my own self. Like what are my core values as me? Because that helps me understand how I navigate the world, what's important to me, it also shows me where I'm misaligned as well. So when I bring that into improv, it shapes how I bring my whole self into it. And this is what's really important to me. And it's going to come out consciously and unconsciously on stage or in any conversation I have. And I'm just operating out of that core of who I am. And that's really important to identify. Otherwise, we end up going off in tangents and creating anxieties for ourselves, which I think aren't helpful, because we're in places where we're people pleasing somebody, we're with people or whatever that is, and it's not aligned with who we really are.
Is it safe to say that improv helps you play to your strengths?
Oh yeah, without doubt, no question about it. Yeah, the stronger I can come in, not with a lot of bravado and strength, but just internal strength, that confidence is contagious. And it allows me to have presence, allows me to have a voice, allows me to speak honestly, allows me to have what I need to serve really well in any context. Can I circle back to the passion piece? Because I forgot to touch on that when you asked about this, why that's so important. That core value gives a lot of confidence and self-confidence to somebody. Like, okay, this is who I am. This is how I bring myself to the table. I'm empowered by that. Passions are the fire that show us, now this is what God's put in me. This is what's really important to me, just my core values, but I'm just passionate about this. And God is moving me in this direction, like this fire of the Spirit to in this area of ministry. For me, improv is a passion. I've tried to get rid of it. Because I'm like, in seasons of my life, I'm like, I don't see where this fits, blah, blah, blah. Like, I know. And then it's like, no, I can't, I just can't get rid of it. So it has to be something there. And so let's keep seeing what's there and let the fire of the Spirit continue to move. Because just as confidence is catching, and so is passion. People that are passionate are influential. I mean, able to harness that passion, and then we start speaking really honestly about from our core of our being. Wow, people start paying attention, and that's one of the 7 things about influential leaders is confidence, passion, and there's others, but passion is a big one as well.
What do you think would be helpful to a person listening to this podcast if they would like to explore what coaching was about, or even what improv was about? What would you say would be a helpful next step for them?
I would say for coaching, I'd say lots of coaches will offer a free one-on-one coaching session. It's like kick the tires a bit. Try it out. Coaching is not right not everybody needs a coach right now. But coaches have great value when we're ready for it. And so part of it is, if you feel like I think I should get a coach, well, just give it a shot for an hour. And if it works, it works. If it's not, okay, maybe it's not the right time. Maybe you need a spiritual director, whatever. That's one thing I'd say. About improv, I'd say if there is a improv theater around that offering classes, take a class. Give it a shot. See what happens. It might be 6 weeks out of your life or 8 weeks. Okay, then you don't have to repeat that if you don't want to. But I'm going to say that. I can guarantee that a person will learn something in that process. And certainly somebody could read my book, obviously. If you want somebody who wants to read my book, and from that point of view, just kind of reading and seeing what the skills of and mindsets of improvisers are as it applies to ministry, certainly.
Mike, it has been a pleasure having you with us today. Thank you for your ministry. Thank you for your passions that you're sharing in these 2 areas.
Yeah.
And I look forward to seeing what fruits this brings. This new development in the ministry of the Southern Ohio Synod. What God has raised up in you. I look forward to seeing what fruit it brings.
Hey, thank you, Bob. It's been a pleasure I love talking about this. So thank you for allowing me to be here. And it's grateful to be here with you as well, Bob.
This is Pastor Rebecca Great, again, the media ambassador and storyteller for the Southern Ohio Synod. And I want to thank you one more time for joining us for this podcast episode. During this episode, there were several mentions of resources for you to check out to explore some different options for coaching, either as a rostered minister or a lay leader within a congregation or ministry. If you are curious about even more opportunities for coaching through the ELCA Coaching Network, you can check out their website, www.elcacoaching.org. And if you are interested in being coached by one of the Southern Ohio coaches, please contact Pastor Mike Weaver, our coaching coordinator, directly by email. His email address is mikew44@icloud.com. Pastor Mike Weaver has also written a book, which Pastor Abrams referenced during the interview. You can purchase it from your favorite big box store, or you can work with a local bookstore to order and purchase a copy. The title is Unstuck: Amazing Momentum for Christian Leaders Through Improv. Until the next time we gather on this podcast, remember that we are stronger and better together, joining Jesus in the restoration of the world.